3 women, all perceived as concerned, loving mothers, but in the end, willing to do the unthinkable for attention, and leaving broken children and broken lives in their wake. The bond between a mother and her child is one of the strongest in the human experience. In a rare but lethal form of child abuse known as Munchausen by proxy, that trust is breached, and the once sacred relationship can turn deadly. Munchausen by proxy, named after an Austrian nobleman who was known for his extravagant lies, involves mothers making their children sick in order to gain attention for themselves, with dire consequences.
You know, there's probably no behavior that I can think of as a psychiatrist that's as counterintuitive and maybe even as shocking as Munchausen by proxy abuse, because it conflicts with everything we think of when it comes to mothering.
In the mid-1990s, a Texas woman shocked the nation with her horrifying deception. Slight of build, with blue eyes and long wavy hair, Cynthia Martinez struck most people as a sweet, caring mother of 3 young boys.
Cynthia is probably one of the most loved mothers that I've ever known in my life.
As the wife of a career military man, Cynthia and her family moved often from base to base. And at each new base, she visited hospitals for a variety of illnesses, which she claimed her boys suffered from.
Some moms are extremely well-meaning but over-anxious. So they monitor their children's health like hawks.
In November of 1994, Cynthia Martinez brought her 7-month-old son Joseph to the Lackland Air Force Base Hospital. She said baby Joseph suffered from a painful abdomen and an inability to tolerate his feeds. He had undergone several surgeries and had a central line for medications and a gastro tube for feeding. He also had a trachea tube to help him breathe. But the doctors treating Joseph found something troubling in his lab tests. The pediatrics clinic called investigator Dave Brannon with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
They'd done some blood work on a child in the hospital, and that blood work had come back showing bacteria common to fecal material. But in a case like that, normally they'd see a ruptured bowel or something like that to explain away the bacteria. In this particular case, they'd run tests. The child had no issues with its bowel or intestines, and so there were suspicions that it was not an accidental incident, but that it had been deliberately caused by somebody.
In order to catch the perpetrator, investigators employed one of their most effective tools, covert video surveillance, or CVS.
Well, once the cameras were installed, we set up observation posts in another room in the hospital. We had no clue whether it was one of the parents, somebody on the hospital staff, or somebody else that had just gone into the room and done something that they shouldn't do.
The surveillance went on 24 hours a day. Within a week, the camera recorded something suspicious. The following surveillance footage is extremely difficult to watch, but this covert recording ultimately helped prevent further abuse of the child.
Mrs. Martinez at that time was doing some acts that we found to be peculiar and out of the ordinary. Specifically, we observed her on tape disconnecting a tube that ran to the child's stomach that was used for feeding and blowing into that tube to distend and extend the abdomen. And she's checking the abdomen to see how much air she's put into the abdomen. He's disconnecting and is now again blowing into the tube. You can see a reaction this time from Joseph. He pulls his legs up and his arm flails. What she's doing is extremely painful for the child and further lend credence to her complaints that her children weren't able to tolerate any kind of feedings. And then probably most heinous of all, we observed her disconnecting the ventilator or the trach tube and occluding that with her finger for about 62 seconds, depriving the child of oxygen and in essence attempting to suffocate it. Now, you'll see here that Joseph is hooked up to a ventilator, and it's hard to make out, but there's a tube that runs up to right underneath his chin where the ventilator is attached to the tracheostomy that he has. And now you see her hand there on that tube. She disconnects it and places her finger over the tracheotomy hole in his throat. In essence, what she's doing now is depriving her son of any oxygen. The child was totally dependent on the ventilator. He could not breathe on his own. And for the next 60 seconds, she's going to keep her finger over the trach. Now, she moves the tube back into position, so if somebody should walk into the room, it would appear that maybe it had just come loose and it's easy to put back into place. But her finger is still occluding the tracheostomy, and the child is not getting any oxygen whatsoever. And she puts it there, but her fingers still occlude the trach. And you can see that at this point, Joseph's body is starting to writhe. His arms and legs are flailing, which you tend to see if somebody's trying to take a breath and is just not getting any oxygen. And she reconnects.
Officials intervened before the child suffered further harm. Cynthia knew that the monitors in the child's room were recording his breathing patterns.
So by depriving him of oxygen, she perpetuates the myth that the child is suffering apnea, periods where it's not breathing properly.
Investigators interviewed Cynthia Martinez for 7 hours, during which time she admitted that she may indeed have Munchausen by proxy.
In the typical case of Munchausen by proxy, the perpetrator is in fact the mother.
Dr. Mark Feldman from the University of Alabama has studied Munchausen by proxy for the past 15 years. He's found that the motivation behind these actions varies, but certain similarities exist among the perpetrators.
The main one seems to be that these mothers feel ineffectual, they feel anonymous in their daily lives. They may have had fantasies of being very conspicuous people, experts, others who would get some public acclaim, but it hasn't happened. And so they misuse their child as an object to appear to be the indefatigable martyrs taking care of very sick children.
Cynthia Martinez seemed to thrive on the attention from her children's illnesses. She was a textbook case of Munchausen by proxy. But despite the evidence, it would take an enormous effort to bring her to trial.
Most of the time when you get an admission from somebody that they have an issue or a problem, or they admit to certain acts, that's normally the tail end of your investigation. However, in this case, back in 1994, that was just the beginning, and I had no idea that what we had started then would ultimately take 6 years to come to completion.
In the meantime, more tragedy would be uncovered during the investigation.
What emerged was a pattern by Cynthia Martinez with 2 prior children. One of them had died, one of them had severe brain injuries.
Well, it appears that Munchausen by proxy is the single most lethal form of child abuse. Mortality rate in Munchausen syndrome appears to be about 9 or 10%. That's just a staggering figure. And in too many of these cases, we fail to recognize what has really occurred. So the fatality statistics could be even higher.
Investigators redoubled their efforts to present an airtight case and to save another child from potential abuse at the hands of his mother. Next, investigators race to make a case while the murderous mom remarries and begins having more children. Because of the nature of the crime, prosecuting the defenders in Munchausen by proxy cases can be a long, arduous process.
This behavior is a vicious form of child abuse, and unfortunately, all too often, the lethality and harm associated with the behavior are minimized by the police and others. So criminal prosecutions, in fact, are relatively infrequent in this field.
Despite evidence that Cynthia Martinez had deliberately introduced feces into her child's bloodstream and videotaped evidence that she had blocked his airway, It took almost 6 years to bring Cynthia Martinez before a judge for her crimes against baby Joseph.
You cannot, under our laws, be convicted of having Munchausen by proxy. It's not a crime. Crime has to be something that you do.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Karen Carlisle took over the case shortly before sentencing.
It's not just one incident of somebody harming a child to get medical attention. It's something that happens repeatedly over a period of time.
Investigators uncovered evidence that Joseph was not Cynthia's only victim.
Cynthia Martinez had 4 sons with Dave Martinez: Anthony, Aaron, Daniel, and Joseph. Anthony never experienced any significant medical problems. Aaron, however, his medical problems began when he was born prematurely.
Baby Aaron suffered from apnea, vomiting, seizures, and a failure to thrive.
He spent a tremendous amount of his life in the hospital. He had a tracheostomy, which means that he had to have a tube inserted into his throat.
He was on an apnea-bradycardia monitor, which monitored his respiration rate and his heart rate. According to Mrs. Martinez, she had not hooked him up to his apnea-bradycardia monitor on that night like she was supposed to. She went in, the child allegedly was not breathing, and she did not call 911.
Instead, Cynthia called her husband. He raced home, but it was too late. The tragedy did not stop with Aaron's death. In October of 1991, Cynthia had another son, Daniel. Daniel suffered from many of the same problems his brother had. To prove to nurses that Daniel's issues were real, according to Agent Brannon, Cynthia disconnected his apnea monitor and then waited several minutes to call for help. To cover her egregious acts, Cynthia claimed that her children suffered from a rare mitochondrial disorder.
Being the master, in essence, of the life and death of a child gives them a sense of mastery, if not feeling even godlike.
Cynthia's husband never suspected his wife was the cause of their suffering.
David told me that, "You mean I could have had 4 normal, healthy children?" And to see the look on his face when he said that, and the emotion and the distraught, really makes it hit home.
David Martinez divorced Cynthia and took custody of his 3 surviving children.
Once Cynthia Martinez was removed from young Joseph's life and was taken away, the child made a miraculous and quick recovery and has been great ever since.
Cynthia then married a man from her church named Paul Lyda.
Paul himself had something of a troubled background. Real nice guy, but had problems. And that when he met Cynthia through their church, that she helped him get through all that.
Paul believed that Cynthia was a victim of trumped-up charges.
I believe he told her that that the doctors at Wilford Hall had committed malpractice and had made up some stories, and she just didn't have the money to have a lawyer who could counter their stories.
Cynthia had 3 children with Paul Lyda. Because of the child abuse charges leveled against her, each child was placed in foster care immediately after they were born. None of the children suffered from the same issues her other children had.
We believe that's because Mrs. Martinez was never allowed to have unsupervised time alone with these children.
In the year 2000, Cynthia Martinez Lyda pled guilty to 4 counts of endangering a child. This sentence only applied to what was caught on videotape.
There was a physician who testified on behalf of the defendant that he believed they did, and in fact that she did, suffer from a mitochondrial disorder. This disorder, there are no tests that you can run to tell whether this disorder exists.
There was some concern and consternation because 7 years she would still be of childbearing age, and or she could very easily move somewhere else in the United States. It's a big country.
Cynthia's husband, Paul Lyda, has custody of their 3 children. he still firmly believes in Cynthia's innocence. Journalist Rick Casey wrote a series of articles on the case.
Well, she still has the true believers, her ex-husband, her church friends, and even her lawyers, one of whom I knew had known for some years. She's a very convincing woman.
Nicole Dennison is a friend of Cynthia's from church. She believes Cynthia has been wrongly accused. She helps care for Cynthia's 3 children that she had with Paul Lyda.
I have never seen any children love their mother as much as her children love her.
Cynthia claims that she suffers from the same mitochondrial disorder that plagues her children.
She can't feed herself. She can't even swallow. She has a feeding tube inserted down her nose, and she's 83 pounds. She's 5 feet 6 inches tall, and she can't do anything for herself, let alone anyone else. So I don't think at this point that she's a danger to anyone.
There is some question as to the cause of Cynthia's illness.
She has been diagnosed as suffering from a syndrome, Munchausen's by proxy, which also is side by side with what they call Munchausen syndrome, which is people faking their own illness to get medical attention, unable to act out on her children, but act out on herself.
First, she had claimed to her husband that she had leukemia. A second thing was that she had falsely accused one of her family members of child abuse. None of those things occurred.
Medical and legal experts are becoming more adept at unraveling these deceptions.
This is a form of abuse, but it's not a mental disorder. Think about other crimes. Most people who commit burglaries aren't instantly assumed to have a mental disorder forcing them to do that. Just as we prosecute the burglar, we need to prosecute these moms.
One critical aspect of the case has yet to be addressed.
And that is the first child that died, young Aaron. When the body was exhumed in Arizona, it was shown that he had an emetic into his system.
There was no medical reason anyone would have given this child Ipecac. This child's problem was that he couldn't keep food down.
That child's demise has yet to be righted.
The state of Arizona has not tried Cynthia Martinez Lyda for the death of 2-year-old Aaron Martinez.
It's hard for me to say that I feel that justice has been done, because justice would mean that Aaron could come back to life and that Daniel wouldn't be brain injured. That would be justice. That would be evening it out.
Of all the evidence that came to light in this case, one thing stands out.
Once Mrs. Martinez was removed from the care of any of her children, symptoms and problems that they had before disappeared. They're growing, they're happy, they're healthy.
The young child that was there at the last, Joseph, who could have met the fate of his 2 brothers, is now a healthy child. He's going to grow up injury-free. That's a happy ending.
If a person has Munchausen syndrome by proxy, it's very similar to a pedophile. You cannot rehabilitate them.
It's in society's interest to make sure that she has no more babies, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that she wouldn't go out and do it again.
A survivor of Munchausen by proxy shares her terrifying story of a childhood lived in fear. Julie Gregory has a unique story to tell. Her autobiographical account of surviving Munchausen by proxy has been published in 20 countries and has introduced countless people to this rare form of abuse.
I had kind of a classical Munchausen by proxy model family. I had a grandmother. She was one of my first perpetrators of Munchausen by proxy. My mother, she kind of picked up where my grandmother left off. And my father was pretty emotionally absent.
The women with Munchausen by proxy behaviors seem to get a lot out of what they're doing. They do covet the attention and nurturance they get
For a child that is caught in the web of Munchausen by proxy, you don't have any point of reference. You don't know that you're being made ill. You have no idea that your parent is not safe or is a perpetrator. And when you're 4, you don't know what it feels like to be sick. You don't have that internal point of reference. So someone can really talk you into being sick, especially if it's someone you trust. My mom started telling me I had headaches and getting medication for migraines. She started saying I had food allergies, and I started going to a lot of different doctors with symptoms that I didn't really know if I had them or not. All I know is that she gave me the medications for them. We would race to the emergency room, and I remember one time my mom saying to me, she turned around and looked at me in the back seat and she said, "Make sure you show them how sick you are at the hospital." I think a common misperception that people have is that they're assuming that the perpetrator of this abuse is a mother instead of looking beyond that role. You know, we're not talking about people who are a little bit off. We're talking about people who are incapable and impaired in their thinking so that they would take their own child and do serious harm.
Some of them engage in what we call perverse relating to authority figures, and doctors and nurses are authority figures in our society. They depend upon these people for the attention they crave, but at the same time badly mislead them, so that definitive intervention into what's going on with the child is impossible.
Julie's mother had suffered through physical, emotional, and sexual abuse as a child.
I think my mom had a lot of issues from her childhood abuses that she needed to work through. And I think that she just needed, by having a sick child, she could gain a lot of compassion from an emotionally intelligent staff of medical professionals.
Munchausen mothers create elaborate medical issues to gain more attention. Julie's mother took it to a dangerous extreme.
A doctor that we saw suggested I might have a heart condition. That gave birth to a whole new range of doctors.
A child diagnosed with a possible cardiac condition is not ignored, and neither is the mother.
You get a lot of specialized care with that kind of situation. So we just kept doing EKGs, Holter monitor tests, until finally when I was 13, I was checked into a hospital for what came to be a heart catheterization. When the nurse told me what I was actually in for, that I kind of blurted out, you know, my mother made this up. The nurse didn't believe me. And the next morning, I was wheeled into the operating room and the surgery was done anyway.
A heart catheterization involves running electrical wires from the arms and legs to the heart. Because Julie didn't have a heart condition to start with, the test results reflected the truth.
My mother and I met with the cardiologist, and he said, "Congratulations. You know, we didn't have any solid findings that there's anything wrong with your daughter." And I remember my mom being really, really upset, almost furious. And here you have this woman in the lobby of a hospital arguing for an open heart surgery for her daughter.
Julie suffered through more tests and surgeries for alleged problems that range from intestinal difficulties to a deviated septum, none of which were necessary.
It didn't really end until I was about 17.
In a psychology class at junior college, Julie learned about a rare form of child abuse called Munchausen by proxy.
That is a dropkick moment. Your whole life, everything you've known is a sham. Every conversation your mother has is about your sickness, how you won't live till you're 30, your heart condition. All of it was a fake.
Julie has worked hard to deal with her painful childhood and her mother's abuse. Julie's mother has never admitted her destructive behavior.
If they're denying it, then there's really no way to engage them in therapy. While a few researchers have made attempts to treat these moms, the results have been very depressing, very saddening, and I think we need to divert our focus to ensuring the absolute protection of these children rather than hoping the mother is suddenly going to see the light.
I do feel angry, I do feel sad, I do mourn the loss of that part of my life. When I look at it from a higher place, there are other people who have had this abuse happen to them. They've lost organs, they've died. I feel, in perspective, that what happened to me was relatively light compared to some other really, really bad cases.
As individuals are coming forward and identifying themselves as the adult victims of Munchausen by proxy perpetrators, we've been able to learn more and more.
Julie Gregory has turned her painful past into a mission to educate.
If I can take my history and somehow open things up to the world so that it recognizes the abuse more quickly, so that it identifies the behavior of the perpetrator just like that, so that it protects a kid, then what I've went through is worth that.
Next, a string of 911 calls to resuscitate a young boy stirs suspicion among medical personnel, while the mother basks in the attention her child's suffering brings.
Where Tanya goes, it seems like children stop breathing.
In Des Moines, Iowa, a young mother named Tanya Reed made a frantic 911 call because her child had stopped breathing. But what motivated the call was not concern for her child's welfare. Originally from the Texas Panhandle, Tanya was the youngest in a large, tight-knit family. Tanya married and moved to Iowa with her husband and 2 young children, Kimberly and Matthew.
She is the average lady next door. On the surface, she's your brownie baking, cookie loving mom, that wants to pick up the kids and take them to soccer practice. But it's down underneath where her life really is living, and that's very dark and very disturbing.
One day, her seemingly normal existence took a bizarre turn. Tony Collins, a paramedic in Clive, Iowa, answered the call at the Reed home to resuscitate baby Matthew.
Anytime a child's involved, especially being a parent myself, it kind of gets the adrenaline going a little bit. There's a little heightened apprehension, concern, sense of urgency, but it had some unique appearances after I arrived, but my focus was on getting to the child that was in distress. I heard the mother hollering, "I'm up here," and went into the bedroom. She was doing mouth-to-mouth and chest compressions on this small child, saying, "Come on, baby, breathe, breathe." And instant stress overload all of a sudden. I had a difficult time getting her out of the way. Once I got her out of the way, the child was already breathing 30-some times a minute and had a pulse. So I thought it was kind of unusual that she was doing CPR mouth-to-mouth. If you're successful in a resuscitation, it's a gradual process. They don't just instantly start breathing normally.
This wouldn't be the last call Tony answered to rescue baby Matthew.
Well, then the address became familiar because we had repeated calls on this same child. It was either a child in a seizure, difficulty breathing, not breathing, and each time when we transport the child to the hospital and learned that they couldn't find anything wrong with this child.
Tanya insisted that Matthew had fairly regular seizures, which resulted in the child not breathing.
He didn't fit the seizure assessment profile. His temperature wasn't spiked. He didn't have head injuries. He didn't have a history of epilepsy that was documented.
The more Tony was called to the house, the more questions he couldn't answer.
How come the father's never here? How come it's always this time of day? This is who's around, and it just wasn't passing the smell test.
Doctors at the Iowa Methodist Children's Hospital were also getting suspicious.
Doctors are taught to listen to mothers and other family members as the single best guide to what's going wrong with the child. We are not taught to doubt what we're told, and it therefore takes a huge leap of judgment, leap of faith to even include Munchausen by proxy in the diagnostic possibilities for these inexplicable illnesses.
Dr. Rizwan Shah is the medical director of the hospital's Child Protection Center. She headed up an investigative team of 6 doctors to look further into Matthew's case.
there were repeated episodes of the same illness. What happened? What were the similarities? What was the differences in each one of those? And when you put those together, it's just like a map reading. Coming to a complex situation like Munchausen by proxy, you have to connect the dots and see where that leads you on a map. You want to be 200% sure before you take this issue into the court. If you do not act in time, you may lose the child.
To complicate matters, there was another child in the house, 4-year-old Kimberly.
My name is Kim. My mother's Tanya. Growing up, had pretty normal childhood.
Kimberly experienced none of the abuse her brother Matthew suffered.
She's never hurt me. I think she spanked me once in my entire life. And I can't look at someone who's been like that and who I know my mother as this caring person.
In many of these families, only 1 or 2 or 3 of the children are victimized. There may be something about these babies that prevented the appropriate bonding early on. So the mother treats these infants as objects, and they become the ones who are abused.
From what I know, I honestly can't say whether my mother harmed my brother or not. I have my suspicions of what may or may not have happened, but I wasn't there. I wasn't there during any of the seizures.
Tanya has staunchly denied any wrongdoing.
She's very articulate and has an explanation for just about everything. Most criminals don't easily and happily confess that they've committed a crime. Well, that's no different for perpetrators of Munchausen by proxy. We really can't take what they tell us at face value, and that applies to Tanya Reid as well.
Mothers with Munchausen by proxy often have a medical background, and Tanya Reid is no exception.
We get very concerned when we see the mother having some kind of medical or nursing training that helps inform the medical deceptions that they engage in.
The medical investigative team at Iowa Methodist Children's Hospital determined that law enforcement should be called in.
My name is Lieutenant Doug Hobart. In 1988, I was assigned as Crimes Against Persons investigator for the Criminal Investigation Division. They told me it was a case of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, is what they suspected, which I had never heard of. Our investigation was what's happened in the past, going back and tracing this family back to all the different places they lived. And we found, the family had lived in several different states.
The investigation brought them to Texas, where the team made a startling discovery.
Well, we found out that she'd had a previous daughter named Morgan, who had a lot of previous hospital emergency room visits, not breathing, convulsions, those types of things, and that the child had died.
The cause of baby Morgan's death was determined to be SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome, but investigators in Des Moines were not convinced.
Our medical examiner reviewed it and found it to be highly suspicious, and quite frankly thought the child was a victim of this Munchausen syndrome by proxy, that Tanya had killed this child. We found that even the medical people in Texas at the hospital where this child was taken, they were even suspecting that Tanya was doing this. And once Tanya was questioned about it down there, she took the child out of the hospital, and within a very short time later, the child was dead.
My heart sunk when I heard about the infant in Texas, and when they dug deeper into the background on that and the patterns and the history, that just gripped at my heart to see that here was a child that wasn't saved.
I was 2 when Morgan was born, and I was 3 when she passed. So I don't remember a whole lot about her. I do remember the night she passed. They told me that Morgan wouldn't be able to come home with us and to give her a kiss goodbye.
After the family moved from Texas to Des Moines, baby Matthew was born, and the pattern started all over again. Next, investigators rushed to get a young boy out of harm's way.
We were very afraid that she was going to kill Matthew.
Mark Feldman has spent the past 15 years studying Munchausen by proxy.
One of the cases I became aware of quite early on was the rather notorious case of Tanya Reid, a woman with nursing training who had been accused of repeatedly suffocating her youngest child, a child named Matthew.
In the course of his research, Dr. Feldman has found the most commonly employed deception is respiratory arrest, achieved through deliberate suffocation.
One mother carried a piece of saran wrap in her pocket, and when she wanted to suffocate the child, who was just an infant, covered his nose and mouth with the saran wrap. One hand, adult hand, will cover nose and mouth. They can appear to be holding the child lovingly, but instead the child can't breathe.
Greg Olson is the author of a true crime novel about Tanya Reid.
When you look at Tanya, you look at this lonely person, this person who has nothing going for her. She is so weak and so sad that her way of getting attention and love is through the harming of her child. Within her childhood, there were lots of instances of illnesses where she was claiming, that she felt the love of her parents when she was ill, or when her mom was sick, she felt like she could cozy up to her mother in the hospital bed.
Like most Munchausen by proxy moms, Tanya liked hanging out at the hospital.
She was just at home there when she was in the hospital with Matthew or Morgan.
When Morgan died at around 8 or 9 months of age, her death, as so often occurs in these cases, was attributed to sudden infant death syndrome. Children like Morgan, who have very repeated respiratory arrests and then die after the age of 6 months, are monumentally unlikely to have died of SIDS.
While no one was able to save baby Morgan, Hobart was determined to keep Matthew from the same fate. He was the first to respond to a 911 call at Tanya Reid's home. She called paramedics because Matthew had once again stopped breathing.
The child looked to be completely exhausted. I mean, like he had just literally fought for his life. He was just limp. All he could do was whimper. She was very calm. When the rescue people arrived, she called him by name and just like it was old home week to her.
Poor Matthew only suffered respiratory arrests when he was all alone with the mother. It's interesting that he never suffered a respiratory arrest at night when Dad was home and when Tanya was asleep.
Another piece of the puzzle surfaced during the investigation.
At age 17, she was caring for, that is, babysitting for, a child who, what do you know, stopped breathing. Tanya called 911 and got paramedics there who resuscitated the child. She was given a big award called the Good Neighbor Award, and she got her name and picture in the newspaper. It's just possible that even as early as the age of 17, she was established as a Munchausen by proxy perpetrator.
The tipping point came when Nurse Callie Sandquist saw Matthew after he and Tanya arrived at the hospital.
We had a child coming in that had been resuscitated, and so we were prepared for that. And he was awake and alert, and when he came, he had a normal blood pressure. He didn't have a fever. Skin color was good. He wasn't postictal, which would be symptomatic of if he had had a seizure.
Callie was also surprised by Tanya's behavior in the emergency room.
She never went over to the child's bed. He was crying and screaming, and yet she never went over to comfort this child that I remember seeing.
Callie colleague noticed something unusual on Matthew's face.
There was a small bruise by his ear, and there were parallel lines across his cheek going from his ear up, kind of like fingers. You know, it looked like scratches from fingernails. The physicians had all seen this child before, so they were already working on their suspicions and calling the appropriate authorities.
We obtained the arrest warrant, went to her residence, and we arrested her and brought her to jail.
Tanya's daughter Kimberly recalls that day.
Well, when I found out everything that was happening with my mom, I was 7 years old, and I remember the cops came to our house in Des Moines. Just 1 second. Didn't know what was happening. My mom didn't come home that night, and the next morning they sent me to Dallas to live with my aunt and uncle.
Once Tanya was separated from her children, Matthew began to thrive.
My dad, my brother, and I moved to Mississippi, and my brother had absolutely no more health problems.
He suddenly was fine. He didn't have respiratory arrests, and that's because he was no longer being suffocated by Tanya.
Today, Matthew is living a happy and healthy life and trying to leave the past behind him. He declined our request for an interview.
My brother and I have just always been extremely close. I've always been kind of very protective of him. You know, I sit here and think, how could you harm your own child? How could you? And when I think that my mother might have done that to my brother, it infuriates me.
All of this is conscious and willful. Sometimes these moms don't precisely know why they're doing what they do, but nevertheless they do it and are aware of each step in the process.
Tanya Reed was tried and convicted on several counts of child endangerment for her crimes against baby Matthew.
Matt says the basic way he feels about it is he does not have a mother.
Tanya Reed was later tried in Texas for the murder of baby Morgan, where she was found guilty and sentenced to 40 years in a Texas penitentiary.
I do wonder about Morgan a lot. I think about when she should have graduated from high school. I wonder if she'd be married by now, if she'd have children of her own. I've heard that if she was still around because of some of the seizures, she would have some brain damage. Instead of having her have an extremely tough life, that this might have been for the best, that she had passed away.
Her brother's suffering and her sister's death has left Kim with unanswered questions.
Why was I lucky? Why didn't anything happen to me? I know for the first 6 months of my life I was colicky and upset stomachs a lot, and, you know, just a sick baby for a little while, and I wonder if that's what caused her to, you know, like I said, snap, or if that's why she did what she did to my brother and my sister.
Yeah, Tanya needed to go to prison, and she needs to be in prison. And for the death of Morgan, she needs to stay there. She's a killer, and the worst kind. Somebody killed her own kids.
I think maybe a mental health facility would do her a lot better than a prison is. But the only problem is she's got to admit what was done before she can get better.
To this day, despite the strength of the evidence, Tanya denies she did anything wrong.
She knows what she did. She knows that she knelt down and put a pillow or her hands over that baby's mouth and nose. And when it went too far, she shook the life out of that little girl.
I love my mother. I care about her. But I don't know if I can trust her to leave her with my children for the weekend.
Where Tanya goes, it seems like children stop breathing.
While Munchausen by proxy is recognized by doctors worldwide, more awareness of the syndrome could save countless lives. Each year, thousands of children fall victim to a caretaker's need for attention. 10% won't live to celebrate their third birthdays. In the name of Morgan Reed and Aaron Martinez and all the other children who were not rescued in time, we owe it to our most defenseless citizens to stop Munchausen mothers before they kill again.